I think I didn't do anything wrong, just kept my options open. But this morning, he handed me a thick envelope, legal documents with his name and a demand for a DNA test. Now everyone's looking at me like I'm the villain, but I was only doing what I had to do. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The Vane family home sat pristine in its suburban setting, 3 bedrooms of carefully curated domestic bliss. At least, that's what Mireille Vane wanted everyone to see. At 32, she'd perfected the art of maintaining appearances, the devoted wife, the caring mother, the consummate professional. Her husband Adam, 35 and methodical in his IT specialist way, had always been the reliable foundation she built her image upon. But foundations can crack. "You're late again," Adam said quietly as Mireille slipped through the front door at nearly 10 p.m. Their 7-year-old daughter Ella was already asleep, her backpack still sitting by the door where Adam had placed it after picking her up from school. "Work?" Mireille replied smoothly, hanging her jacket with practiced nonchalance. "You know how demanding the corporate world is. Not everyone gets to work from home in their pajamas." Adam's jaw tightened slightly, a reaction Mireille had learned to dismiss as his typical oversensitivity. "I called your office. They said you left at 5. "Jesus, Adam, are you tracking me now?" She laughed, but there was an edge to it. "I stopped for coffee with the girls. Since when do I need to report every movement to you?" The truth was more complicated. Mireille had spent the evening at the gym with Sean Butler, a 34-year-old instructor whose easy charm and athletic build provided a stark contrast to Adam's increasingly withdrawn demeanor. Sean made her feel alive, desired, important, everything Adam seemed incapable of doing lately. "I'm not tracking you," Adam said, his voice carefully controlled. "I'm trying to understand why my wife comes home later and later, and why our daughter keeps asking where Mommy is." "Don't you dare use Ella to guilt me," Mireille snapped. "I work hard for this family. Maybe if you showed a little appreciation instead of interrogating me like some kind of criminal—" "Mireille, no, Adam. I'm tired of walking on eggshells around your paranoia. Maybe talk to someone about your trust issues." The next evening brought the monthly family dinner, a tradition Adam's mother Louise had maintained despite her growing disapproval of Mireille. Louise Vane, 61 and sharp as ever, had never quite warmed to her daughter-in-law, and lately her suspicions had crystallized into open hostility. "How's work, dear?" Louise asked Mireille with false sweetness as they sat around the dining table. Adam's younger brother Ben tried to keep the conversation light, but tension hung in the air like smoke. "Busy," Mireille replied, cutting her chicken with unnecessary force. "Some of us have demanding careers." "Must be very demanding," Louise continued, "keeping you out so late. Poor Ella barely sees her mother." "Mother," Adam warned quietly. "What? I'm just saying a child needs her mother present. In my day—" "In your day, women didn't have careers," Mireille interrupted. "Times change, Louise. Maybe you should too." The silence that followed was broken by Mireille's phone buzzing on the table. The screen lit up with a message preview. "Sean, can't wait to see you tomorrow. Same time?" Adam's eyes lingered on the screen for a long moment. Mireille quickly flipped the phone over, but the damage was done. "Who's Sean?" Adam asked quietly. "Personal trainer," Mireille replied without missing a beat. "I told you I was getting back in shape. You never told me that." "I tell you lots of things, Adam. Maybe if you listened instead of brooding all the time." But Adam's expression had changed. Something cold and calculating had settled in his features, and for the first time in months, Mireille felt a flicker of uncertainty. The neighborhood cafe buzzed with the comfortable chatter of suburban mothers and remote workers. Mireille sat with her usual group, 3 women from the office and 2 neighbors who'd become confidants over the years. These gatherings had become her sanctuary, a place where she could vent about Adam's controlling behavior and receive the validation she craved. "He's getting worse," Mireille confided, stirring her latte with theatrical frustration. "Yesterday he actually called my office to check up on me. It's like living with a stalker." "That's not normal," her friend Jessica agreed, shaking her head. "My ex used to do that. Classic signs of emotional abuse." The word abuse sent a thrill through Mireille. It was perfect. It reframed everything, made her the victim instead of the one keeping secrets. "I never thought of it that way, but you're right. He's always questioning me, making me feel guilty for having a life outside the house." "You should document everything," another friend suggested, "just in case." Mireille nodded solemnly, already composing the group text she'd send later, painting Adam as an increasingly unstable husband who couldn't handle his wife's success and independence. At the gym, Sean was setting up equipment for their training session, a euphemism they'd developed for their increasingly intimate meetings. He was everything Adam wasn't: spontaneous, physically confident, and completely focused on her when they were together. "You seem tense," Sean observed, his hands finding her shoulders as she stretched. "Everything okay at home?" "It's Adam," Mireille sighed, leaning into his touch. "He's becoming paranoid, controlling. Yesterday he interrogated me about where I'd been, who I was with. It's exhausting." Sean's expression darkened with concern. "That doesn't sound healthy. Has he ever hurt you?" The question hung in the air, and Mireille saw an opportunity. "Not physically," she said carefully, "but emotionally? He's wearing me down, making me question my own sanity sometimes." It wasn't true. Adam had never been anything but patient and kind. But Sean's protective instincts kicked in immediately. He pulled her closer, his voice gentle but firm. "You don't deserve that. No one does." "I know," Mireille whispered, allowing herself to appear vulnerable. "Sometimes I think about what life would be like if I'd made different choices." Back at home, Adam was helping Ella with her homework, his patience evident as he explained math problems for the 3rd time. Mireille watched from the doorway, feeling a strange disconnect from the scene. This was her family, her life, but increasingly it felt like watching strangers. "Mommy!" Ella looked up with bright eyes. "Daddy's helping me with fractions. Do you want to see?" "Maybe later, sweetheart," Mireille replied, already checking her phone for messages from Sean. "Mommy has some work calls to make." Adam's eyes met hers briefly, and she saw something she hadn't noticed before. Disappointment, yes, but also a kind of resignation that made her stomach clench. The next morning brought an unwelcome surprise. Mireille's supervisor called her into the HR office, her expression serious and uncomfortable. "We've received an anonymous complaint," she began, without preamble, "regarding inappropriate conduct during work hours." Mireille's blood ran cold, but she kept her expression neutral. "What kind of complaint?" "The specifics aren't important right now, but I need to ask. Have you been conducting personal business during company time? Meeting with individuals who aren't clients or colleagues?" "I resent the implication," Mireille replied, her voice rising slightly. "My personal life is none of this company's business, and frankly, I'm shocked that anonymous accusations are being taken seriously." "We're not accusing you of anything," her supervisor clarified, "but we need to be thorough. Can you account for your whereabouts during work hours over the past month?" As Mireille stumbled through explanations and half-truths, one thought dominated her mind. Adam. Somehow he was behind this. He was trying to sabotage her career, control her through fear and humiliation. The war had begun, and Mireille was determined to win. The dinner party had been Mireille's idea, a chance to show Adam up in front of their friends, to demonstrate who really held the power in their relationship. She'd invited their usual social circle to the house, preparing elaborate appetizers and ensuring the wine flowed freely. Adam moved through the gathering like a ghost, polite but distant. Mireille watched him with growing irritation. His withdrawn behavior was making her look bad, as if she were married to some kind of antisocial hermit. "Adam's been in one of his moods lately," she announced to the group with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I swear, sometimes I feel more like his mother than his wife." The comment drew chuckles from their friends, and Mireille felt the familiar rush of being the center of attention. Adam, standing by the kitchen island, went very still. "Maybe he's just tired," Ben offered diplomatically. He'd arrived with their mother Louise, who sat in the corner looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. "Tired?" Mireille scoffed. "He works from home, Ben. How tired can someone get from sitting at a computer all day?" "Some of us have real jobs," she continued, warming to her theme. "Jobs that require actual human interaction and problem-solving skills. Not everyone can hide behind a screen all day." The room grew uncomfortable, but Mireille was on a roll. The wine had loosened her tongue, and months of frustration came pouring out. "And don't get me started on the parenting," she said, gesturing dramatically. "I have to do everything: school pickup, homework help, bedtime stories. God forbid Adam should take initiative with his own daughter." "That's not true," Adam said quietly from across the room. It was the first time he'd spoken in 20 minutes. "Oh, now he speaks," Mireille laughed, but there was cruelty in it now. "What's not true, honey? That I do 90% of the childcare while you sit in your little office playing with computers?" "I picked Ella up from school every day this week," Adam replied, his voice level but strained. "I made her lunch, helped with homework, read her bedtime stories. While you were—" He stopped himself, glancing around the room full of watching faces. "While I was what?" Mireille challenged. "Working? Supporting this family? Sorry if that's inconvenient for you?" Louise stood abruptly. "I think I should go." "No, stay," Mireille said with false brightness. "We're just having a normal married couple discussion, right, Adam?" But Adam was already walking toward the door. "Excuse me," he said to their guests, his composure finally cracking. "I need some air." The front door closed behind him with a quiet click that somehow felt louder than a slam. "Well," Jessica said after an awkward pause, "marriage is hard work, isn't it?" Mireille forced another laugh. "You have no idea. Sometimes I wonder if I married a man or a teenager." But the mood had shifted. Their friends began making excuses to leave, and within an hour, the house was empty except for the mess of half-eaten appetizers and abandoned wine glasses. Mireille found Adam in their bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands. "That was embarrassing," she said, closing the door behind her. "Walking out on our guests like that." Adam looked up at her, and she was startled by the exhaustion in his eyes. "Embarrassing? You humiliated me in front of everyone we know." "I was just being honest," Mireille replied, but something in his expression made her defensive. "Maybe if you participated more in conversations—" "I used to," Adam said quietly. "I used to try. But every time I speak, you contradict me or make jokes at my expense, so I stopped trying." "That's not—" "It is." He stood, moving to the dresser where their wedding photo used to sit. Mireille noticed for the first time that it was gone. "I've been thinking a lot lately about when this started, when you started treating me like I was less than. Adam, you're being dramatic." "Am I?" He turned to face her fully. "When was the last time you said something positive about me to your friends? When was the last time you defended me instead of joining in when they mock me?" Mireille opened her mouth to protest, but no words came, because the truth was, she couldn't remember. "We need to talk," Adam said finally. "Really talk, about what's happening to us, about where you've been spending your evenings, about who Sean really is. The name hit her like a physical blow. I told you. He's a trainer. No, Adam said quietly. He's not, and we both know it. He left the room then, and Mireille sank onto the bed, her heart racing. How much did he know? How much had he figured out? For the first time in months, she felt genuinely afraid. The anonymous HR complaint had been just the beginning. Over the following weeks, Mireille felt the walls of her carefully constructed world closing in. Whispers followed her through the office corridors, and her supervisor's friendly demeanor had been replaced by professional distance. At the gym, Sean was growing nervous. Maybe we should cool things down for a while, he suggested after their latest encounter. People are starting to talk. What people? Mireille demanded, but she already knew. The suburban gossip network was more efficient than any intelligence agency. Your husband called the gym, Sean admitted reluctantly. Asked about your membership, how often you come in, whether you actually work with a trainer. Mireille's blood ran cold. What did you tell him? Nothing. I said it was confidential member information, but Mireille, maybe he has a right to know. You're married. You have a kid. Don't you dare lecture me about my marriage, she snapped. You don't know what it's like living with someone who monitors your every move, who makes you feel guilty for having any kind of life outside his control. But even as she said the words, they felt hollow. Adam hadn't been controlling. He'd been concerned. There was a difference, though Mireille wasn't ready to acknowledge it. At home, the atmosphere had become arctic. Adam was polite but distant, speaking only when necessary and spending most of his time either working or with Ella. Their daughter, sensitive to the tension, had become clingy and anxious. Why is Daddy sad? Ella asked one evening as Mireille tucked her into bed. Daddy's not sad, sweetheart, Mireille replied automatically. He's just thinking about work stuff. He cries sometimes, Ella said quietly. I heard him in his office. The words hit Mireille like a punch to the stomach. Adam, crying? She tried to remember the last time she'd seen him show any real emotion and realized it had been months. When had he become so good at hiding his pain? Adults sometimes get overwhelmed, she said finally. It doesn't mean anything's wrong. But everything was wrong, and they both knew it. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning. Mireille's phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Doctor's appointment, paternity test. She stared at the notification in confusion before realizing it wasn't her reminder. It was Adam's, synced to the family calendar by mistake. Paternity test? She found Adam in the kitchen, making Ella's lunch with mechanical precision. What's this about a paternity test? She asked, holding up her phone. Adam didn't look up from the sandwich he was assembling. Exactly what it sounds like. That's insane, Adam. Ella is your daughter. How can you even question? Can I? He finally met her eyes, and what she saw there made her step back. Because I've been doing the math, Mireille. Thinking about timelines, about when you started staying out late, about when you became a stranger in your own home. You're being paranoid. Am I? Because 7 years ago, around the time Ella was conceived, you were acting a lot like you are now. Distant, secretive, coming home with excuses that didn't quite add up. Mireille's mind raced. 7 years ago seemed like a lifetime, a blur of new marriage stress and career pressures. There had been that brief thing with her colleague Marcus, but it had meant nothing, lasted only a few weeks. I can't believe you're doing this, she said instead. Questioning your own daughter's parentage because you're insecure about your marriage. Then prove me wrong, Adam said quietly. Take the test. Put this to rest. I shouldn't have to prove anything to you. You're right, Adam agreed. You shouldn't. A wife shouldn't have to prove her fidelity to her husband. But here we are. The next morning, Mireille woke to find Adam gone and a thick envelope on the kitchen counter. Her name was written across the front in his careful handwriting, and her hands shook as she opened it. Legal documents, petition for separation, custody arrangements, and at the bottom, a court order for DNA testing. The papers fluttered to the floor as Mireille sank into a kitchen chair. This was really happening. Adam wasn't bluffing, wasn't making empty threats. He was serious. Her phone rang, her mother, Nora Laurent, calling for their weekly check-in. "Mom," Mireille said, her voice breaking, "I think I need help." The law office of Patterson and Associates felt like a tribunal, all dark wood and intimidating leather-bound volumes. Mireille sat across from Adam's attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Rebecca Patterson, who had laid out evidence like a prosecutor building a case. "Let's start with the phone records," Patterson said, sliding a folder across the polished table. These show calls to Sean Butler's number often during work hours, dating back 8 months. Mireille's lawyer, a hastily hired family attorney named David Ross, leaned forward to examine the documents. Mireille herself felt frozen, watching her secrets spread across the table like a toxic spill. "Phone calls don't prove anything inappropriate," Ross said weakly. "You're right," Patterson agreed. "Which is why we also have gym security footage showing Mrs. Vane and Mr. Butler in compromising positions in the equipment storage room." The blood drained from Mireille's face. She'd thought they were being careful, but apparently not careful enough. "There are also bank records," Patterson continued relentlessly. "Withdrawals during supposed work hours, coinciding with gym check-ins on Mrs. Vane's fitness app, hotel receipts paid for with cash withdrawn from the joint account." Hotels. Mireille had forgotten about the hotels, the few times when the gym hadn't provided enough privacy. Each receipt was a nail in her coffin. "And then there's this," Patterson said, producing a child's drawing. "Ella drew this at school last week. When asked to explain it, she told her teacher it showed Mommy with Sean at the park." The drawing was innocuous enough, stick figures holding hands, but in context, it was devastating. Even their daughter had noticed. "My client is seeking primary custody," Patterson announced. "Given Mrs. Vane's pattern of deception and neglect of parental duties, we believe this arrangement serves the child's best interests." "That's ridiculous," Mireille found her voice at last. "I'm her mother. I've never neglected Ella." "Haven't you?" Patterson pulled out another folder. "School records show that Mr. Vane has handled pickup and drop-off duties 80% of the time over the past 6 months. He's attended every parent-teacher conference, every school event. Where were you, Mrs. Vane?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Mireille tried to remember, but the months blurred together in a haze of lies and secret meetings. "Working," she said finally, "supporting my family." "Actually," Patterson said, consulting her notes, "your supervisor provided a statement indicating that you've been leaving work early or taking extended lunches approximately 3 times per week. Hardly the dedication you've claimed." Each revelation hit like a physical blow. Mireille looked at Adam, sitting silent beside his attorney, and barely recognized the man she'd married. This methodical, prepared stranger had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. "There's also the matter of the paternity test," Patterson continued. "My client has reason to believe he may not be Ella's biological father." "That's absurd," Ross protested. "You can't force a paternity test based on suspicion." "We can when there's evidence of ongoing infidelity and questions about the timeline of conception," Patterson replied smoothly. "The court has already approved the testing." Mireille felt the room spinning. "Adam," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Please, we can work this out. We don't need lawyers and courts." "We tried working it out." Adam spoke for the first time since they'd sat down. "I tried talking to you, tried understanding what was happening to us. But you chose lies over truth, Sean over our family. That's not... I never chose." "You did," Adam said quietly. "Every time you came home late with another excuse. Every time you made me the villain in front of our friends, every time you chose to be anywhere but home with your husband and daughter." The truth of his words cut deeper than any legal document, because he was right. She had chosen. Over and over, she'd chosen the excitement of her affair over the stability of her marriage. "The DNA test is scheduled for Friday," Patterson announced. "Pending those results, my client is requesting immediate temporary custody arrangements and financial separation." As they left the law office, Mireille tried one last time to reach Adam. "Please," she said, catching his arm in the parking lot. "Think about Ella. Think about what this will do to her." Adam looked at her with something that might have been pity. "I am thinking about Ella," he said. "I'm thinking about giving her a stable home with a parent who puts her first." He got into his car and drove away, leaving Mireille standing alone in the parking lot, the legal papers clutched in her shaking hands. The courthouse felt like a mausoleum, all marble and echoing footsteps and hushed conversations. Mireille sat with her attorney, watching Adam and his legal team with growing dread. The DNA test results had arrived that morning, sealed in an envelope that would determine the trajectory of all their lives. Judge Margaret Chen, a stern woman in her 50s, reviewed the case files with methodical precision. The courtroom was nearly empty, just the immediate family and lawyers, but Mireille felt exposed, as if the whole world were watching her fall apart. "We're here to address several matters," Judge Chen began. "Custody arrangements, financial separation, and the results of court-ordered paternity testing. Mr. Patterson, you may proceed." Rebecca Patterson stood, her confidence filling the room. "Your Honor, the paternity test results speak for themselves." She handed the sealed envelope to the court clerk, who passed it to the judge. Mireille held her breath as Judge Chen opened the envelope and read its contents. The judge's expression remained neutral, but something in her posture shifted. "The test confirms that Mr. Adam Vane is not the biological father of the child in question," Judge Chen announced. The words hit the courtroom like a physical force. Mireille heard Louise Vane's sharp intake of breath, saw Ben reach out to steady his brother. Adam himself showed no reaction. He'd clearly prepared for this possibility. "No," Mireille whispered, though she wasn't sure what she was denying. The test results? The years of lies catching up to her? The look of quiet devastation on Adam's face? "Mrs. Vane," Judge Chen continued, "do you have anything to say regarding these results?" Mireille stood on unsteady legs. "Your Honor, the test must be wrong. Adam is Ella's father. He's the only father she's ever known." "That may be true," the judge replied, "but biology tells a different story, and given the evidence of ongoing infidelity and deception presented to this court, I'm inclined to believe the science." Patterson presented her closing arguments with surgical precision. The phone records, the security footage, the pattern of lies and manipulation, it all painted a picture of a woman who had systematically destroyed her family through selfishness and deceit. Mireille's attorney did his best, arguing for joint custody and citing her rights as a mother, but the evidence was overwhelming. When he finished, the courtroom fell silent except for the scratching of the court reporter's pen. "I've reviewed all the evidence," Judge Chen said finally, "and I find that the best interests of the child would be served by awarding primary custody to Mr. Vane, despite the lack of biological connection. He has been the child's primary caregiver and has demonstrated stability and commitment to her welfare." "But I'm her mother," Mireille protested, tears streaming down her face. "Being a biological parent doesn't automatically make you a fit parent," the judge replied sternly. "Your pattern of deception, infidelity, and emotional manipulation has created an unstable environment for this child. Mr. Vane will retain primary custody. You'll have supervised visitation rights pending completion of family counseling." The gavel came down with finality. "Additionally, Mrs. Vane, You're ordered to vacate the family home within 30 days and to reimburse Mr. Vane for legal costs incurred in this proceeding. As the courtroom emptied, Mireille sat frozen in her chair. Everything was gone. Her marriage, her home, her daughter, her carefully constructed life. Louise Vane embraced Adam in the hallway, whispering words of support. Ben stood beside them, relief evident on his face. Mireille's parents approached hesitantly. Nora Laurent looked shaken, finally understanding the full scope of her daughter's deception. "Mireille," she said softly, "what have you done?" Peter Laurent said nothing, but his disappointment was palpable. These were the people who had supported her unconditionally, who had believed her version of events even when the evidence suggested otherwise. Now they saw her clearly for the first time. Outside the courthouse, Mireille tried one last desperate attempt to reach Adam. She called his phone repeatedly, but each call went straight to voicemail. She sent text after text, alternately pleading and blaming, but received no response. Her friends, the ones who had laughed at Adam's expense and supported her version of reality, had already distanced themselves. The group chat that had once been filled with gossip and mutual support was now silent. Sean Butler had disappeared from her life entirely, blocking her number and switching to a different gym. The man who had seemed so devoted, so understanding of her situation, had vanished the moment things became complicated. 30 days later, Mireille stood in the empty house that had once been her home, surrounded by boxes and the echoes of a life she'd destroyed through her own choices. Adam had been more than fair in the division of possessions, taking only what was necessary and leaving her most of their shared belongings. But none of it mattered now. The furniture, the decorations, the carefully curated life she'd built. It was all just stuff, without the family that had given it meaning. Her phone sat silent on the kitchen counter, no longer buzzing with messages and calls. The social media accounts that had once been filled with admiring comments were now deactivated. The career she'd claimed was so important had become a source of whispers and sideways glances. As she loaded the last box into her car, Mireille caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror. The woman looking back was a stranger, hollow-eyed, defeated, stripped of all the confidence and manipulation that had once defined her. She had kept her options open, just as she'd told herself in the beginning. But in doing so, she'd lost everything that actually mattered. The perfect family she'd taken for granted was gone, replaced by court-ordered visitation and the knowledge that she had no one to blame but herself. The house keys clinked as she placed them on the kitchen counter for the last time. Outside, Adam's car pulled into the driveway. He was coming to pick up Ella from school, to continue the routine of single parenthood that had been forced upon him. Mireille didn't wait to see them. She got in her car and drove away from the life she'd destroyed, toward an uncertain future built on the ashes of her own choices. Behind her, the house stood empty, waiting for Adam and Ella to come home and begin the slow process of healing. The legal documents were final, the DNA results were conclusive, and the consequences were irreversible. Mireille Vane had gotten exactly what she deserved, though it was nothing like what she'd wanted. In the end, keeping her options open had cost her everything that mattered, and there was no one left to blame but herself. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.